Perfect. We are recording, and this is office hours for November the 13th in the evening. And I am Eileen Cook, and I'm excited to be here. And we have all the things to discuss. So we do have a blue pencil today, which I'm very excited about. So we have Angela with us, waving in the corner. And Angela this is her first office hour. So welcome.
I'm hoping that, like, my kids have been told they're not allowed to come down and bug me. So, and there's two cats here. We'll just see how it goes.
We often get interruptions, so I think it's always sort of interesting when you see people, I won't say whose husband it was that danced in the back in his underwear because he was not aware that the camera was on. And so that provided for some entertainment. So, you know, keep it lively. It's good that way. All right, so before I jump into blue pencil stuff, I am just curious to hear how people are doing with their projects. Tony, I'll start with you because you were just talking about NaNo. How goes your NaNo project?
It's going pretty well. The question I had tonight is, so my main character is now in Japan, which I've spent a little bit of time in. So I've got him in various. It's a thriller, so there's various stages of mayhem going on, and the one thing I struggle with, and this is obviously the first draft, but I'm struggling with his feeling, you know, how he's feeling about things, because he's having to kind of defend himself and get out of tight spots. And I'm curious how you or other people handle that. And I can appreciate, you know, everybody else is not writing a Born Identity style thriller. But I'm just sort of wondering, when you're writing, how does it sort of natural? He's feeling, you know, glad, mad, sad, you know, whatever. Like, how do you? Is there any kind of a rule or any kind of a process you go through? Or anyway, that's sort of my.
Well, I think that's actually quite a reasonable question to start with for a Tuesday night, and one I actually know the answer to, so I love when that happens. So two things is, one, I don't worry about it when I'm writing necessarily the draft. I just let myself get it out on the page, and then I sort of often will go back, and people know that I'm a big fan of sometimes writing in the margin as I'm printing things out or going through a draft and being like, what is it that the character's feeling in this scene? So if that emotion is mad, as you said, first I push myself to be like, is mad actually the right word? Or is it livid? Or is it, he thinks he feels mad, but he actually feels scared. And so he's covering up the fact that he feels scared with being angry at a situation. Mm-hmm. So I will sort of dive a little bit into that. And then I will, from there, sort of jump in and be like, how is that now shown on the page? And is there, you know, a physical description that would show that? Is there something that he's interacting with that I can show that? So it's sometimes a way to pull in setting, because you have this glorious thing of he's in Japan. So I can imagine him, he has to get someplace, he runs downstairs into the, you know, the subway stop. And he's, you know, looking around, and, you know, most of the signs are in Japanese, and it's not like, and he's like, you know, where the hell's the sign for such and such? And so we start to get that agitation that he's feeling, that he can't find what he's looking for, the signs, and kind of going through this. So you can kind of pull in those details that are also great. And you've traveled, I think, to Japan as well.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I was there in July. So that's why the setting's pretty fresh. Yeah. But it makes me happy to know that you just write in it and you have to go back and do it, which I've got to do anyway. But I was just curious whether you had, I naturally put in that he's.
Oh yeah, no, all the time. Just like smooth as silk. It just slides from my pen onto the page. Yes. No, sadly it does not always do that. But I am trying, I mean, sometimes it's natural, like because the scene has high emotional stakes, and that's almost why the scene exists.
Right.
But I often find in writing thrillers, the emotional stakes aren't the purpose of the scene. The purpose of the scene is I need to show this particular clue, or this interaction needs to happen. And so that's what I need to get onto the page. And then when I'm going back is when it's like, okay, what is he actually feeling in that particular scene?
Okay.
So that will make a difference.
Okay.
Kristen, how goes your NaNo project? Your mic's not on, so you're just lip moving.
Sorry, I thought I clicked it. Yeah, no, I have dogs that are probably gonna break out into a little wrestling match here in a minute. But no, No, it's going very well. I'm in like the last, I'm a bit of I'm a rebel this year. I didn't start a new project, but I'm in the final third of my revisions. And then I decided I wanted to, generate some new seeds for stories in the future. And so I've been doing prompts every day, and,
Oh,
found
nice.
some really, cool ones that have stretched a little bit. And, so that's good. And I've been pretty happy with that. So the everyday thing is starting to get difficult, though. Get a little bit wearing. I typically give myself Saturday and Sunday off, and if my kids are off school, I don't always do something. So to kind of continue doing that over this long weekend was a little bit more challenging than really it should have been, because I didn't have a lot on the go. But yeah, so no, but I'm pretty happy so far.
Plugging away.
Yep.
Sounds good. Leslie, how goes your NaNo so far? Oh, wait, hang on. Your mic's off.
Am I working?
There you go. Okay.
Sure. I rolled my eyes for no reason then. It's going not as well as I'd hoped, but better than it would have been if I hadn't been doing this. I think I'm up to 13,000 new words. So the work in progress is now up to 40,000, which is good. Got derailed today by a couple of rejections, and I'm fighting back by submitting a new short story.
Good.
So, but I got 500 words this morning, and I hope to get another at least 500 tonight. So it's coming.
Progress, progress. And Peggy, how goes your NaNo?
I think I call it no.
No NaNo?
I'm not officially doing NaNo. I'm trying to do as much rewriting as I can in November. So it's going okay, not as well as I hoped, but that's my own fault.
Well, and I mean, I think it's always a good reminder, like sometimes I think NaNo is exactly the kick in the pants that everybody kind of needs to kind of get going, but it can also sometimes be really discouraging for people, because you go online and everyone's like, I wrote 5,000 words today. And you're like, I did jack squat. And it can sometimes make you feel like, oh, then I'm not good at this. And because we're writers, we tend to immediately go to the complete insecurity zone of, clearly that means I'm no good. I'm obviously not a serious writer, not at all like the others. Therefore, I shall never publish. Therefore, onward and so on and so on. Fill in the
Reading
ongoing.
my mind today.
I am also psychic in addition to my other skills. So yeah, I think it is that time. Sometimes we do that. And just to remember that really the entire purpose of NaNo from my perspective is really about turning off the internal editor. And reminding ourselves that writing is important to us, and that we want to be doing this, and that this is a good use of our time. And too often things take, sort of control of that between kids, jobs, work, other things get derailed. So that's really the purpose of NaNo, not necessarily a set word count or a page revision count. So to keep that in mind is very useful. And sometimes things are just out of your control. So I think most people know, like, I'm just coming back post-surgery. So, for me, I'm definitely having that thing where the words have not been flowing. Although with the amount of pharmaceuticals I was on, I imagine some really good words could have been flowing had I actually been anywhere near a keyboard. Janine, did you want to weigh in at all on how your project is going? I'm going to guess no. Oh, there you are. Hi.
Sorry. My project is, 3,000 words. It's not going well, but it's going. So I'm coming along.
Going is good. Going is better than not going.
I'm basically starting the outline of this new novel. So that's coming along, but I will have a couple weeks off now coming up. So I'll hope.
Oh, that's glorious.
Yeah, although it's for the surgery thing. So I'm hoping.
Oh, yeah.
I'm hoping I have more time to write, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, speaking for myself, I had all sorts of things I was going to plan to do while I was in recovery. And so far I've done none of them.
All right. Good.
Yeah. But I did watch some Netflix, of which I can't even remember anymore, which, means I can watch them again and it'll be like seeing it all over.
All right. Well, I'll I'll try to stay. Actually, I try to stay away from Netflix because I got myself addicted to one that had 19 seasons.
Oh yeah, that's how it happens.
Watching like a 2-season thing is fine, but
The 19th season can take you a little bit of time.
months to get rid of that one. Okay. Anyway, so that, yeah, that's what I'm working on, and I'm just here because I have never been to one of your office hours. So
Well, it's nice to have you popping in. All right, and Bonnie, how goes your project?
See, I came just in time, huh? My project is going along swimmingly. I'm not doing as much writing as I thought I would, but I need thinking periods in between, so it's working out fine. I just wrote the critical scene where Gregor and Becca finally meet each other, and I'm very excited with it, but it's not as exciting as it should be, so I'm going to have to rewrite that. But I'm going to go forward first because it's NaNoWriMo, and then I'll come back and beef it up. So I'm pretty excited.
And that is some of my age-old advice that Bonnie is very used to, which is you can almost always make things worse. I'm a huge fan of that. Not in real life, although you can do it in real life as well, although I don't recommend it for that purpose. But definitely in fiction, it works particularly well. But not necessarily letting yourself get caught again. And this kind of goes full circle to Tony's question at the start about putting emotion in. I think sometimes the more we know, the more we get stuck with writing. Because when you don't know anything, you're just writing. You're just sort of telling the story and enjoying the process. And sometimes you say something, you're like, that's really good. And then you keep writing and you're really proud and smug with yourself and those kinds of things. But the more you start to learn, sometimes the more challenges you start to have, because you start thinking like, do I have enough goal, motivation, and conflict in this scene? Is the character fully motivated? Do I have enough emotion on the page? What's my point of view happening? What's going on with this? And I've forgotten setting. And we sometimes then lock up and don't write anything because we know it's not right. And Peggy's laughing because, again, I'm channeling her inner brain. So she's like, yeah. And I think sometimes you'll hear the term analysis paralysis, and sometimes that's used for that, where you start to know so much about writing, which is fantastic, but because you know so much about writing, you actually lock up and don't let yourself get the words on the page because you know it's not right. And the challenge with that is remembering that everybody writes shitty first drafts. That's why we call them shitty first drafts. That's why it's a universally held belief that no one publishes their first draft. Although Bonnie's dog is pretty fond of the draft. There's like this tail wag right in the screen. So Bonnie's dog is giving you approval for it, so don't let it go all the way down. But having those kind of opportunities to remember that you just need to get it down on the page, and then you can fix it. And that is the beauty of rewrites, and that is the glory of it, and that's what you want to be doing. All right, so with no further ado, because no doubt she's been chewing fingernails quietly in the corner, I have Angela with us tonight. And Angela submitted pages to the Blue Pencil. And so because we have a couple new people here, just so people know, Blue Pencil is you can submit up to 5 pages to me, yours truly, and I'm happy to take a look at those and offer comments on those pages. So it's what we're going to do. But I wonder first, Angela, if you could tell us a little bit about what the story is about and maybe what inspired you to write it and those kinds of things.
Okay. So I'm a psychologist in my day job, and I've been attending the Surrey International Writers Conference for 5 years and learning a lot about writing. And so my first book that I wrote was sort of a fairy tale book, and I wasn't going anywhere with that. And so I thought I'm going to write something different. So the one that I've sent you the pages on is it's basically time travel book, so quite different than the fairy tale thing I was doing, and it's YA. So, and it starts out in New West, which happens to be where I live, and my 14-year-old happens to go to high school where it's set in. That'll be the opening pages, and so how I came up with the idea partly is because I did some DNA testing with 23andMe, and I thought it was very fascinating how accurate some of that stuff is, because they came up with my first cousin it was on there, and so I sort of blend and I've always been fascinated with Pompeii as well. So basically the main character gets a visit from somebody the future, who's a relative from the future. She's done her own DNA test, and she's trying to find her family. So together they have to go back to the past to save someone who shouldn't have died. And actually that idea I got from watching there was a documentary about, actually it was about Jewish folks and people that died in the Holocaust. And they asked the question, what kind of inventions and what kind of things would have been, would we have now if those people would not have died? So it's sort of a mix of different things where the idea came from. But so yeah, I'm quite curious what you think of my opening pages. I was sort of trashed, but I won't say who it was. Somebody that you would know at Surrey's National Writers Conference. Not trash, but she was pretty, she gave me some pretty constructive criticism. And because what I try to do is I try to be sort of, I guess, kind of creative and say, 5 days, like I started in a place, I said 5 days before, 3 days before, so on. And she didn't like that style. And then it was, they also read it at the Idol. And they got through most of the page, so I was pretty happy about that. But the feedback that I got from the 3 or 4 agents, I thought, okay, I'm going to just change the way that begins. So yeah, so those are the pages I've submitted to you. Oh, I can't hear you.
I muted myself because there's construction vacuum, and then I start talking, and then I'm like, no one can hear me. Okay. So
can I ask a question, Eileen? Is it good to mute yourself when?
Sometimes it will, because then you won't get background sounds for other people. So if you have,
I see other people are muting themselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah.
But first, before you mute yourself, I'm curious: are these then rewritten pages from the Surrey Idol?
Yes, they are. But they are rewritten. But so I just, rather than saying this is where it starts and then 5 days before, 3 days before, so on, I just went right from the starting place onward. I didn't try to do anything super creative that way. So yeah, so I did rewrite it, but it's still, it is rewritten.
I'm just going to go on the record. I don't mind when people have those sort of 5 days before, 3 days before, other than I want there to be a payoff for that.
Right. Yeah.
So whenever you're doing something, I think that's just kind of a good rule of thumb in general. If you are playing with timelines or switching stuff up, there's just always a reason for it. And I had one book that I read where the person kept saying there was a countdown. So it was like 9 days remaining, 8 days remaining. But really it was just until the book ended. Like there wasn't like an event. Like I kept thinking when we got to day 1, and then aliens would come, or I don't know what I expected, but I expected there to be a large event that we had been counting down to in this whole thing. And in the end, it was just like, well, no, but that's the end. Like that's the end of the story. So that's, and I was like, oh, well then drop it, because which is kind of a good thing in general, which I talk to a lot of people about sometimes when you have details in your book is readers think if you put very specific details like 5 days remaining or 3 days prior, that's important. So they're making a note of it. So they're like, okay, this is 3 days before. So if there isn't a payoff, then they're carrying around this information and they're wondering. So I had, for example, another person where he looked over at the clock. It was 2:42. And then the story went on. And so for me, it was like, well, if he's mentioning the exact time, then it's like he looked over at the clock. It was after 2, would have been fine. Or it was almost 3. But 2:42 made me think I should make a mental note of that, because somehow that's going to be very important later in the story. And it had absolutely no relevance to the story. So if you're living in details, just thinking about why they're important is useful. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the pages. So the book opens, and I really like this opening line. So the opening line, I'm just going to read this first little bit for people so they have a sense of the tone.
You want to share your screen, or is that...
Are you okay with that, Angela, if I share your screen?
That's no problem. No problem.
All right, let's do that. Hang on, now you have to wait for me to do it. So people can now see?
Perfect.
All right. So it says, I wonder about the skeletons that lie buried under the floor of my classroom. So I really, Bonnie gave you a thumbs up on that already. So that's just... it does what I think is really important, which is it's intriguing, right? Because I don't know many people who aren't going to read that opening line and be like, Beg pardon? Like bodies buried into the classroom. What's that mean? What's that about? They're going to be pulled on. And Don Moss used to talk at the Surrey conference. I remember one of his lines was, opening lines in particular, but his big thing was all the lines, which is, you know, no pressure or anything, but at least the opening line should be raising a question that the reader wants to hear more about. So having a line like that is definitely a line that I want to know more about. You had a series of questions. So you had, what were their names? How many graves were there? How did a whole secondary school get built on top of a cemetery with no one to speak for the dead? So I switched the one in the middle to a statement. So I just made it all those graves forgotten. And the reason that I did this is twofold. Is one, lists of questions for readers, they start feeling like they're going to want an answer and a payoff to those questions. And oftentimes they're actually rhetorical questions. We're not actually going to give them a payoff for it. But it's building up almost sort of a thing like a question, a question, a question, a question, and we want that payoff. And when there's not going to be that, you can kind of throw the reader a little bit with that. So I always kind of go through for myself, and you often see it also in internal thought, like, when were these guys going to be done with construction? Was the vacuum going to go on for the entire office hour? You know, what if the dogs need to go out? I can't do it until they're done down there. So like just a whole list of questions is internal thought. Just shifting some of them to statements will make it sound more definitive to the reader. So just making those kind of little shifts would help. So then basically you see that this, the main character, she's staring out the window. She's looking at these excavators. They're digging up this sort of hole, and there's some nice descriptions here around the construction site, and the trees are this way. The classroom smells like old wood. I like that. Bumps in the floor. So we're getting sort of the sense of this place that she is in, which is working really well. And then again, just in terms of tone, we're sort of ending at the end of that first paragraph. And most of those students had no idea they were sitting on a cemetery, which again, for me, is a nice sort of little bit of a creepy factor, which I like. I like a little bit of creepy. So that works really well for me. And then it breaks into, you know, my town, New Westminster, is called the Royal City. We still celebrate May Day with elementary students by starting the maypole, etc. The one line that for me just didn't work, one, I'm not certain if you necessarily need all the details about New West at this point, but citizens of the Royal City are proud of their history. I just wasn't certain that was something that a teenager would say. Like, it just didn't sound teen to me, whereas the first paragraph really did. I really felt like you had the voice in that first paragraph, and this felt more travel diary, travel log kind of thing that didn't seem the same. So then we just get a little bit of information. So they're building a new school. One thing I quite like, just because of sort of the humor, is it's one thing to build a school on a cemetery. It's one thing to build a school on a cemetery once, but to make the same mistake twice. So I quite like that, just a little bit of humor. We get the character's name. So Layla comes up. That's really good, especially when you're writing first person. You want to try and sneak a way to have the character's name pop in there, if at all possible, and having it come in those first few pages are great. So then she's being asked to read. She's sort of fumbling for pages for a little bit. You'll see the places where I did, and don't worry, I'm going to send this to you, Bonnie, if you're scrolling madly and like, oh, sweet Jesus, I can't write all this down that fast. Don't worry, because I'm actually going to send this back to you at the end of tonight, so no panic on that. But people know that I am a big fan of the term I use called microcuts, which is the idea of, are there tiny little places that you can take things out that will just tighten things up slightly. So for example, you have here, it's not his fault that I suck at reading. I think it's reading aloud. Yeah, reading out loud. I've been able to drive a car for a year, but I can't read a single paragraph out loud without messing up. Because you have out loud in the second line, you don't need it here. So instead of, it's not his fault that I suck at reading out loud, I would just say, it's not his fault. I've been able to drive a car for a year, but I can't read a single paragraph out loud without messing up. So you get all the same information, and it's just a tiny bit more succinct and a little bit good. They go off to their lockers, and this is an example of looking at where you might just use a more active verb. So you had her put or leave her novel on the top shelf. I wondered whether or not she might toss it onto the top shelf. So something like that. So hang on. Someone's trying to leave me something in the chat window. Yeah. Okay. Because I can't see it at this moment because it's sharing for me. There we go. All right. And again, sort of instead of just shutting her locker, I had her kick it shut. So again, just a little bit more of an active kind of choice. They're, working their way to go through. I did like the description of winters are like that, dark, gray, wet, like Gotham City. The hallways are worn. They're kind of going through. Then there's a city scene here where you're talking about an earthquake drill that had happened, or actually where there's a little bit of shaking and diving under the desk. And this is one where I don't know if you need as much detail in here. So you have, just the other day I was in class and everything started to shake. I dove under my desk in a flash. Since this is an earthquake zone with the ever-present threat of the big one, I've done a ton of earthquake drills in elementary and middle school. My body knew to take cover the instant the ground shook. It was like a reflex. Only the desk could no longer cover me like it did when I was a little kid. If the ceiling had fallen in, I would have either been knocked out or gotten my legs trapped, depending on which part of me was sticking out. About half the students had taken shelter like me. The others hadn't yet developed a dive under your desk reflex, including my teacher. He stood there looking at us. So I just think you could probably trim up a lot of this that I don't know if you necessarily would need. Just that it's sort of, and in fact, it doesn't connect to, like, other than there was this shaking in the thing, I don't think you need to have this at all. Like, I think I might just keep going with them in that particular scene.
Yes, thank you. It will be sort of relevant later in the story, but
yeah,
as in Pompeii, there was earthquakes before the volcano, but I don't know. Yeah, I appreciate your feedback about that.
Or I would make this happen like when she's being asked to read out loud.
Okay. Yeah.
So rather than have her think back on it, where she's like, "Oh, there was this incident," I might have it like maybe that's what saves her from having to read out loud is there's an earthquake drill, because then it's an immediate thing, and you can have that same action and have that moment in there, but it's not the flashback to it, and that would work really well as a way to kind of keep that in. And then we roll into page 2. So it's she and her friends, and they're sort of talking. And I'm always trying to read my things so nice. It's kind of just nice little details. So the light from my window reflects off the face of my watch, throwing disco colors onto the floor. Like, just really nice, kind of very vivid description, a little bit different. I like that. I like the hamster Penny running along and kind of not going anywhere, and it's sort of calming during the day, but like really annoying at night. Like, that kind of, for me, just felt very real, like, because it's felt like that kind of detail that's going to be the kind of thing that occurs exactly. And also a little bit of this intention around Penny's not going anywhere. And I suspect that that is going to end up being important because there's going to be some elements of that. The house is old. It was built in 1912, which is the same year the Titanic sank. That was one where I'm not sure if you need that detail. These are some, again, here around the house where I'm like, I'm not sure that you necessarily need to have them. I'm not a big fan of cutting them out at this point, depending where you are with stuff. I'm a big fan of leaving stuff in and then kind of going back and playing with it. But that was one where I was like, that might be a place where you can sort of trim down a little bit. So she's going back to she and her friend, and they're sort of talking. Again, a nice little detail. Mariana shuffles herself closer. She smells like coconut and pineapple. She loves buying those sweet scents and sprinkling them liberally. Bees love her. I just kind of quite liked that. Like, it was kind of a little bit of humor, and it's kind of this sort of affection between the friends, and that really works really well. And then they're talking about this DNA test that she took. Again, I add just a little bit of action. So remember when I told you that I was going to do a DNA test? I fidget on the bed, pulling on a loose thread of the comforter. I'm just adding that in there again, just so, and people will see this sometimes. I talk about when you have a lot of back and forth with different scenes happening, that having a little bit of action in there just makes sure that the reader continues to see the scene. It also lets you play with putting some emotion on the page. So, and I I'm inserting myself into your story, so sorry about that, Angela, but I had her fidget as if maybe she's a little bit nervous about that, about sharing these details with her friends. So that's why I made it that she fidgeted on the bed. That's a way of kind of showing that emotion. Because I want just that peek into her emotions here. Like, how does she feel? Like, is she super excited to share this with Marianne? Is she anxious to share this with her friend? Is she, I don't think she's dreading, but, dreading, like, what's the emotional thing that she's feeling about this? Because she waited until this point to tell her, which I find kind of telling. So the results have just come in, I'm guessing, but she's had a little bit of a peek at them already. So she knew about them. So she wasn't like, you have to come home with me right away and take a look at this. Like, it's almost like she's sidling up to this information with her friend, which I find interesting. Marianne's very teen because, of course, she's grossed out by the fact that she had to spit. You had a lot of say and saids, so I took some of them out with some action. So I don't know, I say, I would change it to shrug. Just to, again, to kind of change it up a little bit and to have it, again, a little bit more visual. Are you trying to find your real parents? Mariana searches my eyes. She's known forever that I'm adopted. In general, people are going to laugh at me because I'm usually like, don't bother with a whole bunch of backstory, but I might just put a beat or two more about here. So something like, my parents told me when I was 3, or I've known since I was born, and I don't think about it, but sometimes, like, I just want a little bit of a peek about, was the adoption something that was always open in her family and talked about? Or is this a big deal? Like, the fact that she's done this, like, would her parents be horrified that she's done an open adoption? Or that she's, poking around in her kind of stuff? Or is it fine? Or is it something where she's always acted like she never cared about being adopted, but now that she's older, like, just that little bit of an insight? Because I think, and I've done a tiny bit of research in this area because I had a character that was adopted. There's just such a wide range of feelings that teens have about being adopted, and it's often shifting for them. So it might be the kind of thing that didn't bother them at all as a kid, but now that they're going through the teen stuff where you're dealing with rejection and feeling sometimes unlovable in general because you're a teenager and you probably are somewhat unlovable in your teen years, but it's just amplified that much more. So just for me, I would love to have a little bit more of that. No, it's not that. I just don't know anything about my history past my parents. And you had names. And so I wasn't sure if she would know just their first names, or again, is this an open adoption where she would know first and last names? And if she knew her parent, if it was an open adoption, would she know more than just her parents' names? So I was just a little bit curious about that. And I'm curious what it is that she's curious about. There's so much curiosity going on here. Is it, she wants to know, like, were they in the arts like me? Were they, is she telling herself, like, I'm just interested in the medical information here? Like, I just want to know that kind of thing. Or is it, the kind of thing where she loves art and her parents have never been into that kind of stuff. And so now she's wondering, like, were they like that? Were they teenagers when they had me? Like, what is it a little bit? And again, I don't necessarily want to have her go way over the top and describing all kinds of things, but I am interested with that setup. And I would say, I think adoption is such a rich and meaty area to dig into in YA fiction, because YA fiction is ultimately about identity, and adoption is about sort of confronting identity sort of head on. So I think you've got some nice stuff to dig around in here. So of course then Marianne, she's all over this. So she's like, open it up. She wanted to see all this kind of stuff. And there's this, I added a zap of excitement race down her spine, because again, I want to feel that with her. I want to be in that moment with her. And she's sort of clicking on the link for DNA negatives. So this is just a thing for me where I didn't know. I don't know how this, because I've never done 23andMe, like, because you have her here that she gets the names of people, and I had no idea they actually told you people that you might be. So you might want to have a little bit about, like, have her describe, so I spend my spit in, so they're going to tell me kind of my, like, I guess I thought they only told you, like, you're from, Irish and Scottish background, 58%, or, you know, I didn't know that they got into like, by the way, you have some relatives. So I would want to know a little bit more about that, just so that I have some expectation. She's glancing down at the page. The first one's my cousin. She looks down. So she knows that person is her cousin. So that made me think it was an open adoption, but I wasn't certain. And I wasn't sure, like, is she nervous that her mom's going to come into the room, that her mom's going to find out that she's been looking at this information and have an opinion about that. And then you'll see, like, I don't know, is this a lot of information? Because I have no idea. I've obviously never done the DNA test. So that kind of thing. And then I think it was very, like, this is a very quick transition. So that's where I really wanted some emotion. Is like, Marianne was like, wow, they're all over the place. England, US, Israel, Canada, Taiwan. And then she's like, weird, want to go get Slurpees? Like, she totally changes the conversation. And that can work, but it is a quick transition. So I'm going to want to get a little bit more about that, because Marianne doesn't give her a stink eye or anything like that. She just lets it go. So I wonder if a BFF, she just may not have clued in, but having spent the past week with my BFF, she would be like I could see that she was letting me change the subject, but she's going to do that. But then oddly, they don't change the subject because the phone dings and she just found out she has another relative, which again was the thing where I was like, they call you and let you know. Like, I had no idea they did that.
Email you.
Yeah, clearly I need to do this. So I probably don't want to know my relatives any more than I already do. So then this was the one that again threw me, which I was like, holy that, like, listen to this name, Pratnia, 60 AD. And I added, like, I think about it seems impossibly long ago, because I wanted to make sure that the reader pauses there and had like, whoa, we're talking way back. And then this is again, like, would they have names for people that far back? And I guess I have no idea. So I'm just putting.
No, that's fictionalized, that part.
Yeah. So, I mean, you might even like, and I have no idea because I don't know any of that, like whether or not you want to be like that they're coming up with some names with people, or they're, you know, giving you, like, we know that you're related to someone from this time period and this is an example, just so you have an idea, or if you're fully committing that this is how this works in your story, either way, which is fine. And that, you know, Marianne's like not so sure. She wants to know if they're spamming you, and she clicks on the link and a photo appears. But they wouldn't have a photo, would they? Like, it's 60 AD. Like,
well, if it's a painted portrait, so they would have that.
So they have a picture of a portrait.
Like, this is sort of the weird thing. So in an actual DNA test, they would so if people, they can be anonymous or they can put pictures up with their
Can you hang on 1 second?
Angela, is this middle grade or young adult?
It's a young adult. Yeah. You have a thought?
Well, some parts seem a little middle grade, but I'd have to look back and see why I got that impression. But other parts felt young adults, so I just wasn't too sure.
Yeah, I'm going for young adult anyway.
Sometimes it's as simple as when you add in the things that are like that little bit extra of internal thoughts or their emotions, it comes across more young adult than middle grade. Middle grades tend to have a lot more description of what things are happening as opposed to internal thoughts. So it could be something as simple as that.
I also had just a quick thing that twigged with me because you called it middle school.
Thank you for talking amongst yourselves.
Yeah. Oh, high school. It's high school.
Yeah, because I don't think middle school is a term we use in Canada. It's a term they use in the States. We use elementary school or secondary or junior secondary. So it's
No,
just,
we have middle grade, middle school too. It depends on you.
the district you're in.
Yeah.
But this is high school.
Common. Yeah, high school probably. Anyway, I just
We have middle school in Coquitlam district for sure.
okay. I have
See,
never
you
heard
people keep changing this around. As an American who moved to Canada, I keep trying to get these details right. People are like, yeah, we got it. No, we don't got it. We never use that. We use that.
Yeah, well, we never used to use it, but anyway, I guess we do now. Okay.
I'm sticking with
And
Janine,
the districts are different.
Yeah.
keeping it all the same. So did you sort out the portrait issue while I was
we were
away?
waiting. We're waiting.
Okay.
Can I just say, so the portrait, this is where I'm trying to show that, yeah, and like you say, Eileen, I probably need to provide a bit more information about the 23andMe. Like, I don't want to call it that, but because you would normally get people's photos, but this is something that's come up as a portrait, like a painted portrait, which you would never get.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to show that something is weird about this. Like this wouldn't actually in reality come up. So this is where it starts to kind of show, hey.
Well, and I think that's nice because you have Mariana can be that foil. So that's often the best role of sometimes a best friend or someone in a buddy kind of role is that person who is like, that doesn't seem right. That seems weird. My mom did this. She never got pictures of people. That kind of thing where it can be that kind of foil with that. And then just to make it clear that they've sent a photo of a painted picture. Because I was like, so it's a photo, it's a painted picture, and it was kind of back and forth, and I wasn't really clear which way that it was.
Yeah.
And I think that can make that a little bit easier. I love this detail. Like Mariana grabs my laptop and studies the screen. Her hazel eyes take in the image, and I notice the crease in her forehead that's always there when she's thinking carefully about something. It just places us so firmly in your main character's head and lets us see the scene from her perspective, as well as just also tells us a little bit about Marianne. Like I just felt like you got a lot going through there. And then the last line, I know what you're going for, but it just for me, I bumped on it. And maybe other people will weigh in, and I'm curious their thoughts. So basically, Mariana's like the sister I never had. She's always been my solid ground when I feel like I'm floating through the air. I float a lot. Just for me, that just threw me, and I'm not sure, and that might just be me.
Maybe a reference to anchor instead of solid ground, feeling like she's...
I know you're my anchor?
Grounding you or holding you down. So connection to the ground, I think it's the solid ground, the two words together that is probably.
Yeah, she's always been my anchor. That might work better for me. Mm-hmm. Anyone else have thoughts on that, where they bumped or had a perspective?
Yeah, I like anchor better because it's because I'm solid ground doesn't really keep people from floating. It's just solid ground.
It's just a place to land when you stop floating.
I think floating is the wrong verb. I think you're spinning, like you're spinning out, or floating is sort of calm. I think calm, whereas she's more seems like she's more flighty at that when that's happening, right?
So yeah, I think that would be an interesting one to spend some time on that line and be like, what is it exactly that I want to communicate from that line? And how that will work. And again, I think you're setting up, again, because it's 5 pages, so it's very limited amount of things that we work with. But I'm going to give you some really big kudos in here that we have set up already the premise for the story. So we have our main character. We have a tone that is set. There's a little bit of creepy unease, and so there's a sense that something otherworldly is going to happen. And I think the idea of maybe showing the earthquake in that scene where she's reading might, again, also make things feel uneven or not on stable ground, which is fantastic. We have the setup of these two as friends, which I think is going to be really important. My hunch is she's going to rely on that friend to some degree, at least for part of this book, as someone who's going to be there for her and sort of help her along. And we sort of have the setup that she has gotten this information from this DNA test. And for me, what I would do is just have a little bit more about the DNA test. And again, you can make up whatever company name you like. And if you want to show that she's getting information that's different or unusual, having her be like, having Marianne be like, well, my mom did this. She didn't get any of this stuff. Oh, it's new. Like now they're giving you historical information too. They're going through family record stuff apparently. Like, well, I never heard anything about that. So it just becomes that little extra bit. So I'm going to kick it back over to Angela. Any questions for you, for me?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Eileen and everybody. It's a little bit nerve-wracking to have your story like just out there.
You're like, everybody stop looking.
No, but I appreciate those are good suggestions. Like, because I think you just get so in your head when you're writing it that you can't even see what's not working with it. Or that's what I appreciate. I'll incorporate those ideas.
Well, and I think one of the big advantages of bringing it here to office hours, or there is the section in GLIP where you can share pages. I think people know that, where you can trade services. So you can be like, does anyone want to read some of my pages? In exchange, I'll read some of yours. Is you do also get that idea of what one person bumps on, someone else won't. And, you know, Angela, you've been before through Surrey Idle, and I think that is one of the things that is most gut-wrenching and also delightful about the Surrey Idol is, you know, one person's like, I'm loving this, and someone else is like, I am totally out. I would not read another word. And what can bump them sometimes is a kind of a universalism. So, you know, they'll almost all bump, for example, if you open with a character in a dream or just waking up, although there are times you can do those things, right? So don't ever feel there's ever a hard and fast rule, but sometimes you will see people bump in those kind of hard and fast situations. But in general, it's often just completely arbitrary. What picks for one person, somebody else doesn't get bothered by at all. But I think the premise for a YA is really fun. I love time travel YA is just a delightful thing and fun to play with. And of course, there's all sorts of contradictions and difficulties that you can cause for your characters with that. So that will be fun for you to play with as you go along. Now, are you done all the way through? Like, do you have a completed manuscript?
Yes, but it's a bit on the short side. I think I'm up at 44,000 words. So I know I pretty much have, I think I need to just, I need to go back and fill in more around the dialogue. I think I do a lot of sound bites, like that person said this, that person said that. I think I have an idea of where I need to work a bit more. But yeah, essentially the story is written. I just have to go, and I read it through once, and I went to the International Writers Conference, and I added some more parts, and I read it through again. I read out loud all the, you know, what they say. So, so I'm still, and I did send you and the other two, the three of you, is it the red?
Yep, the red pencil, the query.
Query, yes. So, but and I guess my question is, I know with YA, I think the word count, I've looked up, it's like, I don't know, the suggested is like 55,000 to 80,000 or something, but I guess my question is, where should the word count be before I even send? And I know it has to be polished and all that, but
I think if you can get around 65, you're going to be in a much better spot. 45 is definitely going to be short for traditional publishers. Now, if you're thinking of doing ebook publishing, length is less of an issue. So people say, why does length matter? Well, it has to do with cost and shipping and so forth. So 45,000 will just be a small book. And so they'll usually are looking for a little bit longer. So you kind of have two options when you get to the end of your story and you're at 45,000 words. So one is this actually more of a middle grade? Because middle grade, you could be doing upper middle grade. So if she was in grade, she was say 12, 13, you'd be writing more middle grade, and 45,000 would be a pretty good sweet spot to be in. So one thing to think about is like, is it important that she be in high school, or are there topics that I want to cover, or can I make this a little bit younger and keep it at this thing? I do think there's going to be places where you can expand. So for example, if you had that earthquake scene and it's happening live, that's going to be, I'm going to guess, another 300 or 400 words easy in that scene. Like, it's going to make that scene quite a bit longer because we're going to want to see it and be there with her and feeling that emotion with her. Definitely when people are talking, you will see, I'm a big fan of breaking up dialogue so it doesn't look too much like a script. And by a script, I mean like a film script where you have Tony said, Angela said, Eileen said, then Tony said, then Angela said. But where we're breaking up to either get some internal thoughts. So if I'm the main character, that I am reflecting on how I feel about what you just said in that scene, Angela, or that kind of thing. So we're looking for a little bit of that, and or just to sort of visually see the scene in action. So am I leaning back? Because that lets you go beyond what people say. And people have heard me mention it here before, but it's worthwhile mentioning again. People often don't say what they're thinking and feeling. And that's often a big mistake in dialogue in books, is that characters are saying exactly what they're thinking and feeling. And the truth is most of us are not that clear or that honest and open. So sometimes looking at, you know, someone might be saying, yeah, I'd absolutely love to go out with you tomorrow night, she said, twisting her rings on her finger, which makes the reader go, I don't think she wants to go out with that person tonight. So you might see that kind of touch and base. And sometimes people aren't honest with themselves about what they're thinking and feeling. So, you know, in your case, like, how does she feel about sharing this information with her friend? And is she excited or nervous or scared? And all of those feelings are going to come up for her. So that will be there. So that is a good reminder for everyone. I'd love to do blue pencils. So anyone can do that. You just have to let me know, and you can submit up to 5 pages, and we will tackle them. And you can submit multiple times if you like. So either if you've revised something and want something to come back around, or if you want to sort of see like kind of the next 5 pages. Also encouraging people to exchange pages with each other. If you want to do larger, bigger chunks of things, that's also very much a possibility. Bonnie has a thought.
I was just wondering if there was any chance that your character is going to time travel either to the Titanic or to somewhere where there's a famous earthquake. Because if there is, I'm going to give you kudos for getting those hints into those.
Well, you know,
consider getting hints in.
well, when Mount Vesuvius erupted, so the time travelers to Pompeii, there were earthquakes preceding the eruption. So the main character experiences those as she goes into Pompeii. So there's a bit of a, and my thought about mentioning the Titanic is I noticed walking around US, there are a lot of houses that are built in 1912. And I always think of, oh, that's the date when the Titanic sank. But the reason I put that in, and I'm okay to take it out as well, is just because Mount Vesuvius and the eruption of Pompeii is sort of a world disaster. And so is the Titanic. So I just thought that's just a little, you know, I don't have to leave that in, but that was sort of the idea behind it. Is it maybe a bit of foreshadowing another disaster? Maybe, but it's just, I mean, it's a little quirky note about New West as well, that many older houses were built in 1912, and that's the era.
I mean, I don't think that everything has to be a direct lead. So I think having it like, because again, for the reader, they're going to read the back cover blurb, which is going to say when Leanne travels back in time, and it's probably going to say Pompeii on it or have some indication that's that. So they're going to have an idea of where she's going, but they're still going to love those little hints. And they also don't mind being occasionally misdirected. It's just going to be how many details you put in. So if you go on and on about what the, you know, passenger deck looked like on the Titanic, then I'm going to expect that we're going to show up on the Titanic at some point, and I'm going to be disappointed if we don't. So that will make a difference. So I would give there. So I just want to make sure that you saw in the chat window, if you didn't, because they had other ideas where tethering and various other things for your balloon metaphor. So I wanted to make sure that you saw those.
Thank you. I don't know, how does that, I see the chat. I guess I don't know how that works yet, but I did see something. Thank you.
Yeah. So there's like, if you click on the chat, like it looks like a little bubble thing. If you click on it, you'll see what people are saying. And then you can also chime in at the bottom. You could type a message in. So that is there for everyone. All right. So with just a couple minutes left, I'm going to check because we now have a larger group here. There is some discussion that starting possibly in a few weeks, I may move my morning office hours to Wednesday morning. Anyone have any thoughts or concerns on that? Just so that we don't have them twice in the same day. That's the the stick-in wicket. We got a couple thumbs up. All right, so that'll be good. And other than that, if there are any other questions, and otherwise I'm going to set you free for your dinner hour and see you all back here next Tuesday morning, anyone who is available. And thank you, Angela. You were very brave. Like, that took guts. First time in office hours, and she sent in pages, so good on you.
Thank you.
I will send these back to you, and please always feel free to send more. Everyone's going to be wanting to know how this turns out. All right. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Take care. Happy writing. Lots of words. NaNo.
Okay. NaNo.
Thank you.